Welcome in everybody to another lesson. Today we are going to talk about division of decimals. So when we divide decimals, we do it differently than multiplication. We'll start with our first example here. We have 5.98 divided by 2. Well, the first thing you want to do when you're dividing decimals, make sure your divisor has no decimals in it. It doesn't, so we can go straight through and do the division. However, also what you want to do, take that decimal place in the quotient area, stick it right above where you see it in the dividend. It's going to help guide you for where you need your decimals. Alright, so we start here. 2 goes into 5 how many times? 2 times. 2 times 2 is 4. So 5 minus 4 is 1. Ignore the decimals, just bring down your 9 from the dividend. So 2 goes into 19 how many times? 9 times. 9 times 2 is 18. 19 minus 18, that's 1. You bring down your 8 from the dividend. And 2 goes into 18 how many times? 9 times. 9 times 2 is 18. 18 minus 18 is 0. We have a remainder of 0. That's good. In decimals, we keep going. We can tack on zeros to the end of this to keep going till we get no more remainder. That's what's different with decimal division. But otherwise, so what you got to do when you begin, make sure your dividend has no, divisor has no decimals in it. If there are decimals, you got to take care of that. Make sure there are no decimals left. And then you put where the decimal place is in the dividend, you put it right above it in the quotient area. So your answer to this should be 2.99. You do it pretty much like you would division of whole numbers, only it's got decimals in it. But the answer is going to be 2.99. And I got a few more. Alright, what have we here? Let's see. We have 95.12 divided by 4. So again, do we have any decimal places in the divisor? We do not. So we're good there. But we need to put a decimal point right above where you see it in the dividend, put it in the quotient area too, so that way you'll know where the decimals are placed. Alright, now we can begin. 4 goes into 9 how many times? Twice. 2 times 4, well that's 8. 9 minus 8, well that's just going to be 1. Bring down your 5 from the dividend. 4 goes into 15 how many times? 3 times. 3 times 4, well that's going to be 12. 15 minus 12, that's 3. Ignoring the decimal, bring down your 1 from the dividend. 4 goes into 31 how many times? 7 times. 7 times 4, well that's 28. Alright, 31 minus 28, that's going to be 3. Bring down your 2 from the dividend. And then 4 goes into 32 how many times? 8 times. 8 times 4, that's going to be 32. 32 minus 32, well that's 0. So the answer you should end up getting here is 23.78. That would be your answer to this equation. Alright. I got 5 more examples here. I will have 5 more examples. Okay. Now let's say I give you something like 1.68 divided by 0.04. Well, how in the world are we going to handle something like that? How do we handle something like 1.68 divided by 0.04. Remember what I told you. Remember when I said we have to get rid of the decimals from the divisor. How are we going to get rid of the decimals? Well, if you move it over 2 decimal places, you'll have just 4. Okay? So if you move it over 2 decimal places, you'll have just 4. But what you do to the divisor, you must also do to the dividend. You got to move that over to the right 2 decimal places, which would give you 168. So now we are at 168 divided by 4. Now we don't have any decimal places in the divisor. We can begin. 4 goes into 16 how many times? 4. 4 times 4, well, that's 16. 16 minus 16, that's 0. Bring down your 8 from the dividend. 4 goes into 8 twice. 2 times 4, well, that's 8. 8 minus 8, that's 0. We have a remainder of 0. So your answer to this would be 42. And it's going to look weird getting some big number answers, but that's just how division works. You divide by decimals, it's really the same as multiplying by the reciprocal of it in its fraction form. So that's how you can get some of these big numbers. Alright, but I got more. I got 4 more. Okay. Let's say I have 68 divided by 3.4. I have 68 divided by 3.4. Well, we want to get rid of the decimal in the divisor. If this helps you, you can put 68.0 to mark where the decimal is in the dividend. So really you have 68.0 divided by 3.4. In order to get rid of that decimal in the divisor, you need to move it over to the right 1 decimal place. So your new equation is going to look something like this. Let's see, the divisor will end up being 34. And then you move the 68.0 over to the right 1 decimal place, you'll have 680. So 680 divided by 34 is what you end up getting. Now we can do the division. 34 goes into 68 how many times? Exactly twice. So 2 times 34, well, that's just going to be 68. 68 minus 68, that's 0. Bring down the 0 from the dividend. 34 goes into 0 how many times? 0. So then you have 0 times 34 is 0. 0 minus 0, that's 0. You have a remainder of 0. So the answer you should get is 20. You will end up getting 20 for that. But I do have a few more. I got 3 more. Let's say I give you 27.2 divided by 3.2. Well, immediately we see we have a decimal in the divisor, which we don't want. So what we're going to do, we're going to rewrite this equation below it. You'll end up, if you move the decimal place 1 place to the right, you'll have 32. But you also got to do it to the dividend. You move that 1 place to the right, you'll have 272. Okay. Now we are left with 272 divided by 32. We may now begin. Well, 32 goes, we have to go straight forward because 32 doesn't go into 2 or to 27. So we got to figure out how many times does it go into 272. Well, 4. I'm thinking 8. If I had to really make an educated guess, I'm going to say 8. How do you check it? You just check it with some multiplication on the side. 2 times 8 is 16. Okay, the 1. 8 times 3 is 24, plus 1 is 25. Yeah, so it would actually go in 8 times. So 256, because you cannot go over 272, so it's going to go in about 8 times. And we can erase that side work. If you're working on it for a class, you may want to keep that side work. I'm just erasing it for room's sake. But 8 times 32 we said was 256. Okay. Now we see. I know it's going to be 16. We'll have a remainder of 16. But what you want to do, if you're stuck with the remainder working with decimals, go ahead and tack on as many point zeros as you need. Because remember, every whole number has a default of 0.0. Alright, so we'll bring down the 0 from the dividend. 32 goes into 160 how many times? Oh, don't forget to stick that point where the 0.0 is up in the quotient. Up in the quotient. So 32 goes into 160. I'm going to say 5 times. 2 times 5, that's 10. Keep the 0, carry the 1. 5 times 3 is 15, plus 1 is 16. Alright. So it turns out it goes in exactly 5 times. So then 5 times 32, well, that's 160. 160 minus 160 is 0. So in these, you can do a 0.000, however many zeros you need till you get no remainder. You really don't want to work with remainders when you're dealing with decimals. It just creates a big mess. You just tack on however many zeros you need till you don't have a remainder anymore. So the answer to this one should be 8.5. That's exactly what you should get, is 8.5. I got 2 more examples here. Okay, how about we would get 15 divided by 6. So we have 15 divided by 6. Good news is we have no decimals in the divisor. However, do yourself a favor, set yourself up at least a couple zeros in the dividend there. You'll see why. And put the decimal place right above where it is from the dividend into the quotient. The reason I say that is because I can guarantee we're going to have some remainders. These extra zeros we tack on after the decimal place, that should help eliminate the remainders, hopefully. So, we can start dividing now. 6 goes into 15 how many times? Twice. 2 times 16, well, that's 12. So then we have 15 minus 12, that's 3. You see, then we would have had a remainder of 3 if we didn't tack on these zeros, which makes it not so nice. So we want to have no remainder. We'll bring down that 0 from the dividend. 6 goes into 30 how many times? 5. 5 times 6, well, that's 30. 30 minus 30 is 0. We have a remainder of 0. We don't even need to keep going with the other zeros. Once you arrive at a remainder of 0, you're good. That's the goal, get to a remainder of 0. So your answer for this would also be 2.5. Alright. Got one more here. I have 1.8 divided by 12. Well, the good news is in the divisor there are no decimals. That's exactly what we want, no decimals. So before you start doing the division, put the decimal place in the quotient where it's right above the decimal in the divisor. Okay, 12 doesn't go into 1, but it goes into 18 how many times? It goes in 1 time. 1 times 12, well, that's just going to be 12. 18 minus 12, that's 6. Okay, well, we have a remainder of 6. When you're working with decimals, it's just generally good not to have remainders. So what you can do is tack on an extra 0 here, since you got decimals. You could tack on an extra 0 and bring down a 0 from the dividend. It only works with decimal numbers. It does not work with whole numbers. I want to reiterate that. Whole numbers, you'll end up giving yourself something way different. Decimals, you can tack on as many zeros as you want till you get no remainder of 0. But 12 goes into 60 how many times? Well, it goes in 5 times. And 5 times 12, well, that's 60. 60 minus 60 is 0. Okay? Therefore, we got our answer. Our answer is going to be 0.15, also known as 0.15. That would be your answer, is 0.15. Alright. So really, when you're working with dividing decimals, make sure your divisor, which is the number you're dividing it by, has no decimals in it. Move it however many decimal places you need till you have no more decimals. But what you need to do to the divisor, you also got to do to the dividend. You do the exact same thing to it. And then when you're doing the division, you want to, wherever you see the decimal place in the dividend, you put it right above it in the quotient slot, where the answer slot's going to be. And then when you're doing the division, you want to keep going until you have no remainder. So that means you can keep tacking on however many zeros you want after the decimal in the dividend. So that's really all there is to dividing decimals. Next lesson, we are going to do variables with decimals part 2. Hope everyone has a good day. Thank you.